The sun was setting as Beth Taylor rushed around her tiny apartment, searching for her comfortable black shoes. Tonight was another late shift at the Golden Spoon, the upscale cafe where she had worked for the past 3 years. The shoes were hiding under her bed, right next to her old music theory textbook from college. Beth sighed as she pulled them out, brushing off a thin layer of dust from both. Another day, another dollar, she muttered to herself, a phrase her grandmother used to say. Beth's apartment was small but cozy, with just enough room for her bed, a worn-out couch, and the one thing she couldn't bear to part with, her old upright piano. It sat against the wall, slightly out of tune but still playable. Her fingers itched to press the keys, but there was no time. She was already running late. As Beth locked her apartment door, her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, poked her head out from across the hall. "Off to work again, dear?" the old woman asked, her eyes kind behind thick glasses. "Yes, Mrs. Wilson. Bills don't pay themselves," Beth replied with a small smile. "Such a shame. I was hoping to hear you play tonight. Your music makes these old bones feel young again." Beth's heart warmed. Mrs. Wilson was the only person who ever heard her play these days. "Maybe tomorrow morning before my shift. I could play that Debussy piece you like." The old woman's face lit up. "I'd love that, dear. Now hurry along before you're late." The bus was crowded as usual, and Beth stood holding onto a handrail, thinking about how different her life was now from what she had planned. 5 years ago, she had been a promising piano student at West Ridge Conservatory of Music, with dreams of concert halls and standing ovations. Then her dad got sick. The medical bills piled up, and her music scholarship wasn't enough to cover everything. 1 semester away from graduation, she had to drop out and find work. The Golden Spoon was a fancy cafe in the wealthy part of town. The customers were mostly business people and rich folks who barely looked up from their phones when Beth served them. They had no idea that the woman pouring their coffee could play Chopin's Revolutionary Etude from memory, or that she once performed with the Youth Symphony at Carnegie Hall. "You're cutting it close, Taylor," said Mike, the shift manager, as Beth hurried through the back door of the cafe. "Get your apron on. We've got a full house tonight." Beth tied her apron around her waist and pulled her long brown hair into a neat ponytail. The evening rush at the Golden Spoon was always hectic, with people stopping in for coffee and dessert after dinner or business meetings running late into the night. Beth moved between tables with practiced ease, smiling politely as she took orders and delivered food. "Excuse me, miss? This isn't what I ordered," a man in an expensive suit complained, pointing at his coffee. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'll fix that right away," Beth said, though she was certain he had asked for a regular latte, not the sugar-free one he was now demanding. That's how the evening went. One small problem after another, one demanding customer after another. By the time her break came around at 9 p.m., Beth's feet were killing her, and all she wanted was to sit down for 10 minutes. She slipped into the staff room and collapsed onto a chair, pulling out her phone to check her messages. There was a text from her roommate from college, Zoe, who had gone on to become a successful musician. "Playing with the symphony this weekend. Wish you were here. Miss your talent. Never too late to come back, you know." Beth smiled sadly. Zoe always believed in her, even when Beth had stopped believing in herself. She started typing a congratulatory response when Mike burst into the room. "Beth! There you are. Mr. Hoffman wants to see you." Beth's stomach dropped. Richard Hoffman was the owner of the Golden Spoon, and he rarely spoke directly to the staff. "Did I do something wrong?" Mike shrugged. "He's in his office. Better not keep him waiting." With a knot of worry in her stomach, Beth made her way to the small office at the back of the cafe. She knocked softly on the door. "Come in," called a deep voice. Mr. Hoffman was a tall man with salt and pepper hair and sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. He was talking to a well-dressed woman Beth had never seen before. "Ah, Beth," Mr. Hoffman said. "This is Mrs. Eleanor Hammond. She's organizing a charity gala at Hammond Estate this Saturday, and she's looking for catering staff. I thought of you immediately." Mrs. Hammond looked Beth up and down with an appraising eye. "Do you have experience serving at formal events?" "Yes, ma'am," Beth replied, remembering the handful of weddings and business functions the Golden Spoon had catered in the past. "I've worked several formal events with Mr. Hoffman." "She's one of my best," Mr. Hoffman added. "Reliable, professional, and good with people." Mrs. Hammond nodded, apparently satisfied. "The event is a fundraiser for the city's arts programs. It starts at 6 p.m. and will likely run until midnight. The pay is double your usual hourly rate plus tips. Beth's eyes widened slightly. Double pay would help enormously with this month's rent. I'd be happy to work it, Mrs. Hammond. Excellent. We need 6 servers, and Richard has already recommended 3 of his staff. I'll need you there by 4 p.m. for setup and briefing. After Mrs. Hammond left, Mr. Hoffman explained more about the event. The Hammond family was one of the wealthiest in the city, and their annual charity gala was a major social event. This year's theme was Reviving the Arts, with proceeds going to fund music and art programs in underprivileged schools. It's a good opportunity, Beth, Mr. Hoffman said. These people are big tippers and they often remember good service. Plus, the Hammonds are connected to everyone who matters in this city. Beth nodded, but her mind had caught on something else. Music programs for schools. That's what had saved her as a kid. Before the scholarship to Westridge. It was her public school music teacher, Mrs. Lee, who had discovered Beth playing on the old piano in the school auditorium and arranged for her first proper lessons. Thank you for recommending me. Mr. Hoffman, I won't let you down. The rest of the week flew by in a blur of regular shifts and preparation for the gala. Beth picked up extra hours to make up for the time she'd be spending at the Hammond event, coming home so tired each night that she barely had energy to eat dinner, let alone play her piano. On Friday night, Beth forced herself to sit down at the instrument. Her fingers were stiff from carrying trays and wiping tables, but as she began to play, the familiar warmth spread through her hands. She started with simple scales, then moved into a Bach prelude, one of the first complex pieces she had mastered as a teenager. The music filled her small apartment, and for a moment she was transported back to the practice rooms at Westridge, where she would spend hours perfecting each phrase, each emotional nuance. She moved from Bach to Chopin, losing herself in the familiar patterns and emotional swells of the music. A knock at her door startled her back to reality. "Don't stop on my account," called Mrs. Wilson through the door. That was beautiful. Beth laughed and opened the door to find her neighbor in her nightgown, a cup of tea in her hand. "I'm sorry if I disturbed you, Mrs. Wilson." "Disturbed? Child, that's the most beautiful thing these old ears have heard all week. You play like you were born to it." Beth invited her in, and they talked for a while about music. Mrs. Wilson had been a choir director in her younger days and had a deep appreciation for classical music. "Why aren't you playing professionally, dear?" "With talent like yours," and Beth's smile faded slightly. "Life got in the way, I guess. Dad's medical bills, student loans. Sometimes dreams have to wait." Mrs. Wilson patted her hand gently. "Dreams delayed are not dreams denied, my dear. Your time will come." After Mrs. Wilson left, Beth couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the gala, about all those wealthy people gathering to support arts education, while she, a living example of both the system's success and failure, would be serving them drinks. The next morning, Beth woke up early and spent extra time getting ready. The catering staff would be wearing all black, so she chose her nicest black pants and a simple button-up shirt. She pinned her hair up in a neat bun and applied light makeup, wanting to look professional. As she was about to leave, her eyes fell on the piano. On impulse, she sat down and played a few measures of Rachmaninoff, one of the most challenging composers she had studied. Her fingers remembered the complex patterns, the emotional highs and lows of the piece. For a brief moment, she was not Beth the waitress, but Beth the pianist, the girl who had once dreamed of playing in concert halls around the world. The sound of her phone alarm broke the spell. It was time to go. Just another gig, she told herself as she locked her apartment door. Just another day of making ends meet. But as she headed toward the bus stop, a strange feeling settled in her chest. Something like anticipation, or perhaps hope. Something told her that tonight wouldn't be just another shift. The Hammond estate was even grander than Beth had imagined. As her bus approached the large iron gates, she caught her first glimpse of the mansion, a sprawling 3-story home with perfectly manicured gardens and a circular driveway where expensive cars were already pulling up. Beth clutched her small backpack closer, suddenly feeling very out of place. "You must be with the catering staff," said the security guard at the gate after checking her ID. He pointed toward a side entrance. "Service personnel enter through there." Beth nodded and made her way around the massive house, passing by marble fountains and rose gardens that probably cost more to maintain each month than her entire apartment. The side entrance led to a bustling kitchen where staff in black and white uniforms were already preparing trays of fancy appetizers. "There you are," said Lisa, the catering manager from the Golden Spoon. "You're just in time. Get your serving gloves on and help Tom with the champagne trays." For the next hour, Beth helped set up the serving stations and practice the specific way Lisa wanted them to present the food and drinks. Everything had to be perfect. The napkins folded just so, the glasses spotless, the server's posture straight as boards. "Remember," Lisa told the team during their final briefing, "these people donate thousands of dollars to charity. Some of them could buy and sell our entire cafe without blinking. Be invisible, be efficient, and above all, be professional." At exactly 6 p.m., the first guest began to arrive. Beth was stationed in the grand foyer, offering champagne flutes from a silver tray. She put on her best server smile as she greeted guests with a polite "good evening" and "champagne, sir, madam." The people who entered the Hammond estate were dressed in clothes that probably cost more than Beth's monthly rent. The women wore sparkling jewelry and designer gowns, while the men were in tailored tuxedos that fit them perfectly. Beth overheard snippets of their conversations, talk about summer homes in the Hamptons, children at Ivy League schools, and upcoming charity galas just like this one. As the foyer filled up, Beth noticed a door open to her right, revealing a glimpse of the main ballroom. Her breath caught in her throat. There in the center of the room, illuminated by the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, stood a magnificent grand piano. It wasn't just any piano, it was a Steinway concert grand, its glossy black surface reflecting the lights above it like a dark mirror. "Keep moving, Beth," Lisa whispered as she passed by. "Don't gawk." Beth quickly returned her attention to her tray, but her eyes kept drifting back to the piano whenever she had the chance. It had been so long since she'd played on a proper grand piano. Her fingers itched with the memory of smooth ivory keys beneath them. As the evening progressed, Beth was reassigned to serve hors d'oeuvres in the main ballroom. The room was even more impressive up close. High ceilings with intricate molding, walls adorned with what looked like original artwork, and that piano, now just 15 feet away from her. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced Charles Hammond, a distinguished-looking man with silver hair and the confident posture of someone used to commanding attention. "Welcome to our annual arts education fundraiser. Tonight, we celebrate the importance of music and arts in our schools and communities." The crowd applauded politely as Mr. Hammond continued to explain the evening's program. There would be dinner, followed by speeches from educators and students who had benefited from their foundation, and finally, a special performance by renowned pianist Anthony Winters. "Mr. Winters has performed with symphonies around the world," Mr. Hammond said proudly. "We're honored to have him play for us tonight." Beth nearly dropped her tray. Anthony Winters was a legend in the classical music world. She had studied his recordings during her time at Westridge, marveling at his technical precision and emotional depth. The thought of hearing him play live made her heart race with excitement. The evening continued, and Beth moved through the crowd like a ghost, offering food and collecting empty glasses. She spotted a few young people in the corner of the room, looking somewhat uncomfortable in their formal wear. From their conversation, she gathered they were scholarship recipients, talented students from underprivileged backgrounds who were getting the chance at a music education that Beth had lost. "Still can't believe I'm here," one young boy said, his eyes wide as he looked around the ballroom. "Last year I was playing on a keyboard with missing keys, and now I have piano lessons twice a week on a real grand piano." Beth smiled to herself as she overheard this. At least the money from these wealthy people was actually helping kids like her. Maybe some of them would get the chance she never had, to finish their education and pursue their dreams without the burden of financial hardship. As dinner was being served in the adjacent dining room, Beth noticed a commotion near the entrance. Lisa was speaking urgently with Mrs. Hammond, both of their faces creased with concern. Beth moved closer under the pretense of collecting empty glasses. "What do you mean he's not coming?" Mrs. Hammond was saying, her voice tight with stress. "The performance is the centerpiece of the evening. His agent just called," Lisa replied. "Mr. Winters has come down with food poisoning. He's in the hospital and won't be able to make it tonight." Mrs. Hammond pressed her fingers to her temples. "This is a disaster. What are we going to tell our guests? The whole point of tonight is to showcase the power of music education, and now we have no musician." Beth froze, her tray half full of empty glasses. No Anthony Winters? After all the build-up, after all the excitement she'd felt at the prospect of hearing him play live, she felt almost as disappointed as Mrs. Hammond looked. "Can we find a replacement?" Mr. Hammond asked, joining the conversation. "What about one of the scholarship students?" "They're talented, Charles, but not ready for a solo performance of this caliber," Mrs. Hammond replied. "Besides, we promised our donors a world-class pianist." Beth bit her lip, an idea forming in her mind. It was crazy, completely inappropriate, and would probably get her fired. But before she could think better of it, she found herself taking a step forward. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing." Mrs. Hammond turned to her with a frown. "Yes, what is it?" Beth took a deep breath. I was a piano performance major at Westridge Conservatory. I had to leave before graduating, but I studied classical piano for 15 years. I could play if you need someone. The looks on their faces might have been comical under different circumstances. Shock, disbelief, and in Lisa's case, horror at Beth's boldness. "You?" Mrs. Hammond said, looking Beth up and down as if seeing her for the first time. "You're suggesting that you fill in for Anthony Winters?" Beth felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. What had she been thinking? "I'm sorry. It was just an idea. I didn't mean to overstep." She turned to leave, but Mr. Hammond caught her arm gently. "Wait, what pieces can you play?" Beth turned back, hardly daring to hope. I had been preparing for my senior recital when I left school. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, several Chopin nocturnes, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2. Mrs. Hammond exchanged a look with her husband. "Charles, we can't seriously consider having a waitress perform for our guests." "What choice do we have, Eleanor?" Mr. Hammond replied. "It's either this young lady or no performance at all." Lisa stepped forward, her face stern. "Beth is one of our best servers, Mrs. Hammond, but this is highly unusual. If you'd prefer, we can announce that Mr. Winters is indisposed and proceed with the rest of the program." Beth held her breath as the Hammonds conferred quietly. Finally, Mr. Hammond turned to her. "Young lady, Beth, is it? Would you be willing to play just one piece for us? A sort of audition? If it's suitable, we might consider letting you perform a short program." Beth's heart leapt into her throat. "Yes, sir. I'd be honored. Follow me," he said, leading her toward the piano. Beth set down her tray and wiped her sweaty palms on her black pants. As she followed Mr. Hammond to the center of the ballroom, she felt as though she were walking in a dream. The magnificent Steinway loomed before her, its lid raised to project sound into the room. "Go ahead," Mr. Hammond said, gesturing to the piano bench. "Show us what you can do." Beth sat down, adjusting the bench slightly. The keys before her were pristine, unlike her weathered upright at home. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. Then, without overthinking it, she began to play the opening of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. The first chords resonated through the ballroom, rich and full in a way her apartment piano could never produce. Beth felt the familiar sensation of losing herself in the music, her fingers finding the keys from muscle memory, built over thousands of hours of practice. The complex passages that had once seemed so daunting flowed from her hands naturally, as if the years away from serious performance had never happened. When she finished the introduction and looked up, she found not just the Hammonds watching her, but a small crowd of guests who had wandered in from the dining room, drawn by the music. Their faces showed surprise and appreciation. "Well," said Mr. Hammond, breaking the silence, "I think we may have found our pianist for the evening." The next few minutes were a blur for Beth. Lisa, the catering manager, pulled her aside with a mixture of shock and worry on her face. "Beth, what are you doing?" she whispered. "You're here to serve drinks, not play piano." "I know, I'm sorry," Beth replied, her heart still racing from her brief performance. "But they need someone, and I can do this. Please, Lisa." Lisa sighed, looking from Beth to the Hammonds, who were speaking with some of their guests. "Fine, but if this goes poorly, I can't protect your job." Beth nodded, understanding the risk she was taking. Meanwhile, Mrs. Hammond had summoned the event coordinator, a tall woman with a tablet and an earpiece. "We need to prepare Ms. Taylor for a performance," Mrs. Hammond said, her tone businesslike. "Find something appropriate for her to wear." The coordinator looked Beth up and down. "I think we might have something in the guest room that could work. Follow me." Beth was led upstairs to a luxurious bedroom with a walk-in closet that was bigger than her entire apartment. The coordinator rummaged through hanging garments before pulling out a simple black dress. This should fit. One of the Hammonds' nieces left it here last month. Hurry and change, and we'll announce you in 20 minutes. Left alone, Beth stared at the elegant dress in her hands. Was this really happening? Just an hour ago, she had been serving champagne, invisible to the wealthy guests. Now she was about to perform for them. After changing, Beth looked at herself in the full-length mirror. The dress fit surprisingly well, falling just below her knees. It was simple but elegant, with a modest neckline and cap sleeves. Without her server's uniform, she looked like a different person, like the concert pianist she had once dreamed of becoming. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. 5 minutes. "Ms. Taylor," called the coordinator. "Mr. Hammond would like to speak with you downstairs." Beth took a deep breath, smoothed the dress, and headed back to the ballroom. As she descended the grand staircase, she noticed a few guests looking up at her with curiosity. She wasn't invisible anymore. Mr. Hammond was waiting by the piano, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Ah, there you are. Much better," he said, noting her change of clothes. "Now about tonight's program. How many pieces do you feel comfortable performing?" Beth thought quickly. "I could play for about 40 minutes, perhaps 4 or 5 pieces." "Perfect. I'll introduce you shortly. We've told the guests that Mr. Winters is unfortunately ill, and that we have a last-minute replacement, a promising young pianist." He paused, then added, "I've taken the liberty of having the staff set up a video camera. These fundraisers work better when we can show donors what their money supports. I hope that's all right." Beth nodded, though her stomach tightened at the thought of being recorded. "That's fine, sir." "Good, and what would you like me to call you when I introduce you? Beth Taylor, or do you have a stage name?" The question caught Beth off guard. "Just Beth Taylor is fine." "Very well, Ms. Taylor, the stage is yours in 5 minutes." As Mr. Hammond walked away to gather the guests, Beth approached the piano again. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, familiarizing herself with their weight and response. This Steinway was expertly maintained, its action smooth and responsive in a way her old upright could only dream of being. She began to plan her program in her head. Start with something impressive but accessible. Maybe the Rachmaninoff she'd already begun. Then perhaps some Chopin, always a crowd pleaser. End with something powerful. Beth was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the young boy approaching until he was standing right beside the piano. It was one of the scholarship students she had seen earlier. "Are you really going to play instead of Mr. Winters?" he asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. Beth smiled. "I am. Are you disappointed?" The boy shook his head. "No, I just didn't know that someone who serves food could also play piano like that." His innocent observation made Beth laugh. "Well, sometimes people have hidden talents. I'm learning piano too," he said proudly. "I've been taking lessons for 8 months now." "That's wonderful," Beth replied. "Do you like it?" "I love it." The boy's face lit up. "My teacher says I have good hands for playing. Do you think? Could you play something by Mozart? He's my favorite." Beth's heart melted at the request. "For you?" "Absolutely." "How about the Rondo alla Turca?" "Do you know that one?" The boy nodded enthusiastically. "That's the one that goes..." He hummed a few bars of the famous melody. "That's it. I'll play it just for you." A woman called to the boy, and he ran off with a quick "thank you" over his shoulder. Beth watched him go, a warm feeling spreading through her chest. This was why music mattered. Not the fancy clothes or the wealthy patrons, but the pure joy it brought to people like that young boy. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Hammond's voice rang out over the crowd. "If you would please make your way to the ballroom, our musical program is about to begin." Guests began to file in, filling the chairs that had been arranged in front of the piano. Beth stood to the side, trying to calm her nerves as the room filled. There must have been over 100 people now, all dressed in their finest, all about to watch her perform. "As you know," Mr. Hammond continued once everyone was seated, "we had planned to have the renowned Anthony Winters perform for us tonight. Unfortunately, Mr. Winters has taken ill and sends his sincere regrets." A murmur of disappointment rippled through the crowd. However, Mr. Hammond raised his hand. "We are extremely fortunate to have found an exceptionally talented young pianist who has agreed to step in at the last moment. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Beth Taylor." The applause was polite but reserved as Beth walked to the piano. She could feel the skepticism in the room. Who was this unknown woman replacing the famous pianist they had expected to hear? Beth sat down at the piano bench, adjusting it slightly. She took a moment to gather herself, hands hovering over the keys. Then she began to play. The opening chords of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled the room once again, but this time Beth played beyond the introduction, delving into the full first movement. Her fingers danced across the keys, bringing to life the complex emotions of the piece, the melancholy, the passion, the triumph. As she played, Beth forgot about the audience, forgot about the expensive dress, forgot about being a waitress. She was simply a musician again, speaking through her instrument in the language she loved most. When she finished the first piece, there was a moment of silence, that precious second between the final note and the audience's reaction that every performer knows so well. Then came the applause, not polite this time, but enthusiastic. Beth looked up to see surprise and appreciation on many faces. Encouraged, Beth moved on to her second piece, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The gentle, dreamy melody seemed to cast a spell over the room. Beth noticed some audience members closing their eyes, completely absorbed in the music. Next, remembering her promise, she played Mozart's Rondo alla Turca. As the playful, energetic notes bounced around the room, Beth caught sight of the young boy sitting with the other scholarship students. He was beaming, his head bobbing slightly with the familiar melody. For her final piece, Beth chose Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, a showstopper that had been part of her senior recital program. The technically demanding piece required all of her skill and concentration. Her hands flew across the keyboard during the Frisca section, the rapid notes crisp and clear. As she played the final crashing chords, Beth felt a rush of emotion. This was what she had been missing all these years, not just playing the piano but sharing music with others, communicating something that went beyond words. The applause that erupted when she finished was thunderous. The audience rose to their feet, their faces alight with genuine appreciation. Beth stood and bowed, her cheeks flushed with exertion and joy. Mr. Hammond approached the piano, clapping enthusiastically. "Ladies and gentlemen, Beth Taylor," he announced again, leading another round of applause. "What an extraordinary performance." As the applause continued, Beth noticed movement in the back of the room. A man was making his way toward the piano, an older gentleman with white hair and wire-rimmed glasses. There was something familiar about him, but Beth couldn't place him until he was standing right in front of her. "Dr. Reynolds?" she gasped. The man smiled, his eyes twinkling behind his glasses. "Hello, Beth, it's been a long time." Dr. William Reynolds had been the chair of the piano department at Westridge Conservatory when Beth was a student. He had been her advisor, her mentor, the one who had encouraged her to apply for the scholarship in the first place. "What are you doing here?" Beth asked, still in shock. "I'm on the board of the Hammond Arts Foundation," he replied. "We fund scholarships for students at Westridge, among other things." He shook his head in wonder. "I had no idea you would be performing tonight. When you left the conservatory, I lost track of you. We all did." Beth looked down, a flash of the old pain returning. "I had to leave. My dad got sick and the bills—" Dr. Reynolds nodded sympathetically. "I understand. But Beth, you haven't lost your gift. That was a magnificent performance, thank you," she said softly. "Now," he said, his expression turning serious, "we need to talk about getting you back to music." Beth stared at Dr. Reynolds, hardly able to believe what she was hearing. "Get back to music? I don't understand." Before he could explain, they were interrupted by a crowd of guests eager to congratulate Beth on her performance. Mr. and Mrs. Hammond approached, their faces bright with excitement. "That was extraordinary, Ms. Taylor," Mr. Hammond said, shaking her hand warmly. "Simply extraordinary." Mrs. Hammond nodded in agreement, her earlier skepticism completely gone. "Where have you been hiding this talent? Playing like that while working as a server?" Beth smiled awkwardly, not sure how to respond. "Thank you. I'm just glad I could help when you needed someone." "Help? My dear, you saved the evening," Mrs. Hammond exclaimed. "Our guests can't stop talking about you." It was true. All around the room, people were buzzing with excitement, many of them glancing in Beth's direction. Some were even recording videos with their phones, capturing the unexpected moment when a waitress had transformed into a world-class pianist before their eyes. A woman in a deep blue gown approached next, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun. "That was quite impressive, young lady," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Patricia Wilson, director of the City Symphony." Beth's heart skipped a beat as she shook Ms. Wilson's hand. The City Symphony was a prestigious orchestra that performed at the Grand Concert Hall downtown, a venue Beth had only dreamed of playing in. "Thank you. Ms. Wilson, it's an honor to meet you." "The honor is mine. We're always looking for fresh talent. Perhaps we could arrange an audition?" Before Beth could respond, another guest stepped forward, a tall man with a beard and glasses. "Ryan Cooper from Harmony Records," he said. "Have you ever considered recording? Your interpretation of Chopin was something special." Beth felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Just hours ago she had been invisible, serving drinks to these same people who now crowded around, her with business cards and offers. Dr. Reynolds noticed her discomfort and gently took her elbow. "I think Miss Taylor could use some air," he said firmly, "if you'll excuse us for a moment." He guided Beth toward a set of French doors that led to a terrace overlooking the Hammonds Gardens. The cool night air was a relief after the crowded ballroom. "Feeling a bit overwhelmed?" Dr. Reynolds asked with an understanding smile. Beth nodded, taking a deep breath. "It's a lot to take in. This morning I was worried about making rent. Now people from the symphony and record labels are talking to me like I'm some kind of discovery." "You are a discovery," Dr. Reynolds said. "Or rather, a rediscovery. I always knew you had extraordinary talent, Beth. When you left Westridge, it was a tremendous loss." Beth leaned against the stone balustrade, looking out at the moonlit garden. "I didn't have a choice, Dr. Reynolds. Dad's medical bills were piling up and I couldn't afford tuition even with the scholarship. I had to work, I understand. Life happens." He joined her at the railing. "But perhaps now is the time for a second chance." "What do you mean?" "The Hammond Foundation doesn't just fund scholarships for children. We also have a program for exceptional adults who've had to interrupt their education due to financial hardship." Dr. Reynolds smiled. "It's called the Revival Grant, full tuition plus a living stipend for up to 2 years. Beth's breath caught in her throat. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying that I would like to nominate you for the grant. You could finish your degree, Beth, and based on what I heard tonight, you could have a real career in music." Tears sprang to Beth's eyes, catching her by surprise. For so long, she had pushed down her dreams, convinced herself that her music was just a hobby now. The thought of returning to Westridge, of finishing what she had started, it seemed too good to be true. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll think about it," Dr. Reynolds replied. "The committee meets next month. You'd need to prepare an audition piece and—" He was interrupted by a commotion from inside. They turned to see Lisa, the catering manager, hurrying toward them with a panicked expression. "Beth, there you are. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we have an emergency in the kitchen. 2 of our servers have food poisoning. They think it was something they ate before their shift. We're critically understaffed for dessert service." Beth looked from Lisa to Dr. Reynolds, torn between her current job and the conversation about her possible future. Dr. Reynolds smiled understandingly. "Go, we'll talk more later." He handed her a business card. "Call my office tomorrow." Beth nodded gratefully and followed Lisa back inside. In the hallway, the catering manager helped her out of the borrowed dress and back into her server uniform. "I can't believe what's happening," Lisa said as she zipped up Beth's black vest. "First you become the star of the evening and now half my staff is sick. What a night." "I'm sorry about the others," Beth said. "But I can help. That's what I'm here for." Lisa shook her head in amazement. "You know, most people would have quit the second they got applause like that. But here you are, still willing to serve desserts." Beth smiled. "I don't leave jobs unfinished." For the next hour, Beth moved through the dining room once again, this time serving elaborate chocolate desserts and coffee. The experience was surreal. Many of the same guests who had applauded her performance now looked at her with surprise as she set plates in front of them. "Aren't you the pianist?" asked an older gentleman as she poured his coffee. "Yes, sir," Beth replied with a small smile. "Extraordinary," he muttered, shaking his head. "Simply extraordinary." Some guests were less polite, barely acknowledging her as she served them, immediately back to seeing her as just the help. But others were warm, complimenting her playing and asking questions about her background. The young boy who had requested the Mozart piece beamed when she approached his table. "That was amazing," he said. "When I grow up, I want to play just like you." His words touched Beth deeply. "Keep practicing," she told him. "Music will always be there for you, even when other things aren't." As the evening wound down, guests began to leave, and the catering staff started the cleanup process. Beth was gathering empty dessert plates when she noticed someone had left their phone on a table. She picked it up, intending to turn it in to the lost and found, when the screen lit up with a notification. It was a social media alert. Curious, Beth glanced at the screen and froze. There was a video of her playing the piano, already with thousands of views and hundreds of comments. The caption read, "Waitress stuns gala with world-class piano skills. Share if you believe in second chances. Unexpected talent, hidden genius, excuse me," said a voice behind her. Beth turned to see a middle-aged woman in a red dress. "I believe that's my phone." "Oh, I'm sorry," Beth said, handing it over. "I was just gathering the dishes and saw it was left behind." The woman took the phone, then gave Beth a curious look. "You're her, aren't you? The waitress who played piano tonight?" Beth nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I shared that video of you," the woman said, gesturing to her phone. "Hope you don't mind. It was just so inspiring, seeing someone with such talent who clearly hasn't had an easy path." "I don't mind," Beth replied, though the thought of thousands of strangers watching her play was a bit unnerving. "Good, because I think it's going viral. You might want to be prepared for some attention." After the woman left, Beth continued her work, her mind racing. A viral video? What did that mean for her? Would the Golden Spoon be upset that she'd performed at a client's event? Would this affect her chance at the revival grant? By the time the catering team had packed up their equipment and loaded the vans, it was well past midnight. Beth was exhausted but too wired to feel sleepy. As the staff prepared to leave, Mr. Hammond appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Miss Taylor, might I have a word before you go?" Beth followed him to a small study off the main hallway, where Mrs. Hammond and Dr. Reynolds were waiting. They looked serious, and Beth's stomach tightened with anxiety. "We've been discussing your performance tonight," Mr. Hammond began, "and your situation." "My situation?" Beth asked. Mrs. Hammond stepped forward. "Dr. Reynolds has told us about your circumstances, how you had to leave school to support your family. It's a story we've heard too often among talented young people. The video of your performance is spreading quickly online," Mr. Hammond added. "People are captivated by your story. The waitress with the soul of a concert pianist." Beth shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not sure how I feel about that. I was just trying to help when you needed a pianist. And we're grateful," Mrs. Hammond said. "But we'd like to help you now if you'll let us." Dr. Reynolds smiled at Beth's confused expression. "Charles and Eleanor have decided to create a special scholarship in your name, the Beth Taylor Second Chance Fund. It will help other adults who had to abandon their arts, education due to financial hardship." And Mr. Hammond added, "They'd like you to be the first recipient." Beth's eyes widened. "But the revival grant?" "This is different," Dr. Reynolds explained. "The revival grant is competitive with a lengthy application process. The Hammonds want to sponsor you directly, starting immediately. We'd cover your tuition to complete your degree at Westridge plus a stipend for living expenses," Mrs. Hammond said. "All we ask in return is that you perform at next year's gala and share your story to inspire others." Beth felt her legs go weak. She sank into a nearby chair, overwhelmed by the offer. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Dr. Reynolds encouraged. "This is the second chance you deserve, Beth. But my job at the Golden Spoon," she began, "will always be there if you need it," Mr. Hammond said. "But something tells me you're destined for a different stage." Beth looked at the three faces watching her expectantly. Was this really happening? Could she really go back to school, finish her degree, become the pianist she had always dreamed of being? "Yes," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Then louder, with growing confidence, "Yes, I accept." "Thank you," Mrs. Hammond beamed. "Wonderful. Now, there's just one more thing. Your viral video has caught the attention of someone else." Beth looked at Mrs. Hammond with curiosity. "Who else has seen the video?" Just then there was a knock at the study door. A tall man with salt and pepper hair entered the room. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit and carried himself with quiet confidence. "Ah, right on time," Mr. Hammond said. "Beth, this is David Chen, director of the National Conservatory of Music." Beth's heart nearly stopped. The National Conservatory was one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. Its graduates went on to play with the world's finest orchestras and perform in the most celebrated concert halls. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Ms. Taylor," Mr. Chen said, extending his hand. "Your performance tonight was remarkable, especially considering the circumstances." Beth shook his hand, feeling slightly dazed. "Thank you, sir. It's an honor to meet you," Mr. Chen smiled. "When Charles called to tell me about you, I was skeptical. But after seeing the video, I knew I had to meet you in person." He gestured to a chair. "May I?" Everyone sat down, and Beth found herself in a surreal conversation about her musical background, her training, and her forced departure from Westridge. Mr. Chen listened attentively, occasionally nodding or asking questions. "Your technique is excellent," he said when she finished. "But what impressed me most was your emotional connection to the music. That can't be taught." "Thank you," Beth replied, still struggling to believe this was happening. "I understand the Hammonds have offered you a scholarship to complete your degree at Westridge," Mr. Chen continued. "That's a wonderful opportunity." Beth nodded, glancing at Dr. Reynolds, who was watching the exchange with interest. "However," Mr. Chen said, "I'd like to offer you an alternative." He leaned forward slightly. "The National Conservatory has a special program for exceptional mature students. It's accelerated and intensive, designed for performers who already have significant training but need refinement before launching their professional careers." Beth's eyes widened. "Are you offering me a place at the conservatory?" "I am, with a full scholarship, living stipend, and access to our international performance program, which would give you the opportunity to play in concert halls across Europe and Asia." The room fell silent as Beth tried to process this unexpected turn of events. Just this morning she had been worrying about her rent and picking up extra shifts. Now she had offers from not one but two prestigious music institutions. "This is overwhelming," she admitted. Mrs. Hammond touched her arm gently. "You don't have to decide tonight, dear. Take some time to think about both offers." "Though not too much time," Mr. Chen added with a smile. "Our program starts in 3 weeks." Beth looked at Dr. Reynolds, who had been her mentor for years before she had to leave school. "What do you think?" she asked. Dr. Reynolds sighed, then smiled. "As much as Westridge would love to have you back, the National Conservatory would open doors that we simply can't. If I were in your position, I'd take Mr. Chen's offer." Beth was touched by his honesty. "Thank you." The meeting concluded shortly after, with Beth promising to give both offers serious thought. As she left the Hammond estate that night, her mind was spinning with possibilities. The life she had resigned herself to, serving coffee, playing her old piano in a tiny apartment, scraping by, was suddenly transformed into something entirely new. The next morning, Beth woke to the insistent buzzing of her phone. Groggily, she reached for it and was shocked to see dozens of notifications. Text messages from friends, voicemails from numbers she didn't recognize, and social media alerts by the hundreds. The video of her performance had indeed gone viral overnight. It had been shared thousands of times, picked up by news websites, and was trending on multiple platforms. The story of a waitress with extraordinary piano talent had captivated people's imagination. As Beth scrolled through the comments, she was moved by how many people found her story inspiring. This brought tears to my eyes. "Never give up on your dreams. I quit music school because of money too. This makes me want to start playing again. Proof that talent can be found in the most unexpected places." Beth was still reading when her phone rang. It was Lisa from the Golden Spoon. "Beth, have you seen the news?" "You're everywhere." "I've seen some of it," Beth replied. "It's a little overwhelming." "Well, brace yourself for more. Mr. Hoffman wants to see you at the cafe as soon as possible. And there are reporters asking questions about you." Beth's stomach tightened. "Reporters? And is Mr. Hoffman angry?" Lisa laughed. "Angry? The cafe's phone has been ringing non-stop with people wanting to know when the piano waitress will be working next. This is the best publicity the Golden Spoon has ever had." 2 hours later, Beth sat across from Mr. Hoffman in his office at the cafe. The normally stern manager was smiling broadly. "Beth, I've known you for 3 years, and you never mentioned you were a piano prodigy." "I'm not a prodigy," Beth said modestly. "I just studied for a long time." Mr. Hoffman waved a hand dismissively. "Whatever you call it, people are fascinated. I've had 3 local news stations calling for interviews, and customers are asking if you'll play here." "Play here?" Beth looked around the small cafe, trying to imagine where they would even put a piano. "I'm having a baby grand delivered tomorrow," Mr. Hoffman announced proudly. "We're going to feature live music on weekend evenings. I want to offer you a position as our resident pianist, better pay than serving and more suitable for your talents." Beth was touched by the offer. "That's very kind, Mr. Hoffman, but I've been offered a scholarship to the National Conservatory of Music. I'm going to accept it." Instead of disappointment, Mr. Hoffman's face showed genuine happiness for her. "The National Conservatory? Beth, that's wonderful!" He leaned back in his chair. "Well, the piano is still coming, and the job is yours for the next 3 weeks before you go, if you want it." Beth smiled. "I'd like that very much." The following weeks passed in a whirlwind. Beth's story continued to spread, bringing journalists to the Golden Spoon to interview her and watch her play on the new baby grand piano that now occupied the corner of the cafe. Regular customers who had barely noticed her before now requested her by name and stayed for hours to listen to her play. Beth also visited the National Conservatory, touring the facilities and meeting with instructors who would soon be her teachers. The campus was beautiful, with state-of-the-art practice rooms and performance spaces. It felt like a dream. Her tiny apartment was now filled with cards and letters from well-wishers, many of whom shared similar stories of dreams deferred because of financial hardship or family obligations. Beth read each one, touched that her experience had resonated with so many people. On her last night at the Golden Spoon, Mr. Hoffman closed the cafe to regular customers and hosted a special farewell concert. The small space was packed with friends, regular customers, and even Mrs. Wilson from across the hall, who sat in the front row with tears in her eyes. "Before I begin," Beth said to the gathered crowd, "I want to thank all of you. 3 weeks ago, I thought my dream of being a pianist was over. I had convinced myself that serving coffee was my life now, and music was just a hobby." She looked around at the familiar faces, people who had been part of her daily life for years without knowing her true passion. But sometimes life gives you a second chance when you least expect it, and sometimes it takes other people to remind you of who you really are. Beth played for nearly 2 hours that night, pouring her heart into each piece. When she finished, the applause was as enthusiastic as it had been at the Hammond estate. But this time, it came from people who had known her as Beth the waitress first, and were now cheering for Beth the pianist. After the concert, as the last guests were leaving, Beth found herself alone with Mrs. Wilson, who had waited patiently to speak with her. "I brought you something," the old woman said, handing Beth a small package wrapped in tissue paper. Inside was a delicate silver music box. When Beth opened it, it played a tinkling version of Debussy's Clair de Lune, the piece she often played for Mrs. Wilson in the mornings. "So you'll remember where you came from," Mrs. Wilson said softly. Tears filled Beth's eyes as she hugged her neighbor. "I could never forget." 1 week later, Beth stood in the empty apartment, looking around at the bare walls and packed boxes. Most of her things would go into storage while she lived in the student housing at the conservatory. The hardest item to leave behind was her old upright piano, the faithful friend that had kept her connected to music during the hardest years. Beth ran her fingers over the worn keys one last time, playing a simple melody that had been the first song she ever learned as a child. The piano was out of tune and some of the keys stuck, but it had been her lifeline when everything else was falling apart. A knock at the door interrupted her goodbye. It was the movers ready to take her piano. "Where's this going, miss?" asked one of the men. Beth smiled. "To the Children's Community Center downtown. It's a donation." She had arranged for her piano to go to a place where kids without access to instruments could learn to play. It felt right. Her faithful old piano would now help someone else discover the joy of music, just as her first school piano had done for her. As Beth watched the movers carefully load her piano into their truck, she thought about the strange, wonderful journey of the past month. From invisible waitress to scholarship student, from serving drinks to the wealthy to preparing for an international performance tour. But most meaningful of all were the messages she continued to receive from people inspired by her story. People who were picking up instruments they had abandoned, returning to art classes they had quit, rediscovering passions they had set aside because life got in the way. Beth's phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Reynolds. "Your first class is Monday. Ready to finish what you started? She smiled as she typed her reply. More than ready. This time nothing will stop me. As Beth locked her apartment door for the last time, she felt not like she was leaving something behind, but like she was finally, truly coming home, to the life she was meant to live, to the music that had always been in her heart, waiting patiently for its moment to be heard again.